Hey folks, just a quick intro. Between the time we recorded this and we went to post-production, this company, Perceptura, changed their name and visual identity to RootCause.ai. We weren't able to make all the changes in the audio track, but we tried to make them as much as possible in the captions and notes. Please take a look there and check them out at RootCause.ai. Hello and welcome to Building the Impossible with Jocelyn Houle, the podcast for technical and scientific founders. Today, we are meeting with Ayman Elhalwagy, who's the CEO and founder of Perceptura. Perceptura is an amazing company really focused on what they call a causal inference engine. They have a lot of interesting technology under the hood, but one way to think about it that he suggests in the podcast is it's like Moneyball for business. And what that really means is deeply understanding the data across the entire data estate to understand how metrics moves, why they're moving, using a really dispassionate approach and a digital twin that helps produce not just where you may have cause and effect, but what to do next. Ayman's background is amazing. He is an applied AI PhD who's now, this is his second or third startup, I believe. He's done a consultancy as well. He's been very successful in the past. And we'll talk today a little bit about, how he's developed this notion of an autonomous ontology. We're going to talk a little bit about, the lessons that he has taken from his PhD research into the commercial world. And we'll also talk a little bit about the founder realities of how resilience, honesty, and trying to explain technology to different personas with the right metaphor has been something he's been overcoming in the last year and working through. So if you've ever wished that your data could tell you why and what to do next, this is a show for you. If you're a technical founder and a PhD who's wondering if they should jump in, you'll also get some great advice from Ayman. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy the show. Quick disclaimer, I am a senior product leader for Security AI. All opinions on this show are my own and not those of the company. I'm also an accredited investor. Please do not take any advice on this show as financial advice. Thanks and enjoy the show. Hello, Ayman. It's so nice to see you.
Likewise. Nice to see you, Jocelyn.
It has been a long time. I'm really excited to get some updates, but for those who don't know you yet, can you give a quick intro of you and Perceptra?
Yes, I am one of the founders and CEO of Perceptura. So we are a causal inference engine. So we are Moneyball for business. So if you recall back to the Brad Pitt on Moneyball, they found that whilst getting home runs was great, the Oakland A's found that there were specific metrics like how often you reach the next base that actually were the root causes of wins. Concept of finding the root cause of problems and what to do about them, and we apply them to business using causal inference and a whole bunch of other technologies, which I'm sure we'll touch on today.
Absolutely. I want to get into causal inference and the whole notion behind Perceptura because I've always been fascinated with it. And having worked in the finance world, I know that few companies are asking kind of what is the end game? What is the purpose of all this work that we're doing with data? And that's one of the most interesting things, in addition to the technologies you use to get there. But before we do, this show is really focused on technical and scientific founders and their journey from potentially working in a lab or computer science work, and then moving through to the launch pad or creating their own company. And I think, tell us a little bit about your background, but I almost want to say you've done this twice as a founder.
Well,
Okay.
I'll explain my background. So I come from academia. I've got a PhD in applied AI. So I was working on a problem called machine condition monitoring for predictive maintenance. So this is when we hook up AI to motors and we look at how they operate, and then we figure out the likelihood of them breaking in the future, at what point in the future, and how they're going to break, what things are starting to go wrong with them. So then we can send the maintenance teams earlier in and make sure that there's no unplanned downtime. So specifically, the problem that we were facing with that is there was enough data on the whole topic. So there's a huge cold start problem when you hook up to a new motor. Models that you train typically don't work because it's what we call in machine learning, it's out of distribution. It's a different kind of distribution, different operating mode, different environments. My work was all around energy efficient ways of making sure that we reduce that cold start problem. We can collate data from a lot of different motors and build one single specialist that can work across multiple motors. And it's similar to the whole concept of how LLMs are trained across the entire internet instead of just on a single book with a single style. So that was my academic background, and then I started a consultancy with my research team that I was researching with in my PhD. We did quite a few R&D projects and commercialization of R&D and development of technology. And then me and another one of the founders, Jonas, had an idea to start this, and we basically wanted to model why things happen in terms of causality. And I was obsessed with causality for, I think, about a year or two at the point, just learning about it and understanding, well, why is it not applied in enterprise, and or why is no one using this if this is so magic? And then I kind of just got my head around the problems, and we developed solutions to these problems. Then we built a product around it, and here we are.
Interesting. Tell me a little bit. I like the idea, the obsession. I think that life is made up of a series of healthy obsessions, hopefully. And so the causality question, root cause question, really started in this machine, like cold start problem, right, that you were trying to solve. Tell me a little bit about the evolution of the ideas until you and Jonas kind of decided to step out, because it's an idea journey first.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the core principle is businesses always want oversight on what's happening in their business, and the C-suite, especially, they want the what and the why it's happening and what to do about it. These three key things. And when we do applied research, we're doing it towards specific business problems, and ultimately they center around these things. So a lot of my research lent a hand to that. And similar to him, his research was he was actually sponsored by Intel, working on optimizing their chip fabrication scheduling. So he was working on the business question of how do we schedule chips so that they get produced in the right time, so they get delivered always on time to the customers that need them.
You and Jonas were both really kind of in the seam there, in a new area of science meets business, because a lot of scientists are doing science. And that's where they started. And they don't necessarily have a business question that's framing the work. Would you say that you had a special experience along with Jonas, in that you had one foot in the business and one foot in like pure research?
Yeah, and I think I was certainly quite lucky because I got a lot of interaction with my sponsor company, and I learned to understand the business context and commercially viable research and non-commercially viable research, and actually getting raw data from industry directly, which I was working with. I felt quite privileged in that regard, doing my PhD in that environment. So I was always working under constraints, and obviously gave me more creative solutions to think of. But when I went out into the business world and applied it to other problems, it was quite easy to translate my experience researching into my experience solving business problems.
Interesting. A lot of scientists have a hard to sort of think about solving the problem as an after effect of the science. And what you're saying is you were able to turn it into a repeatable pattern.
Yeah. We
Okay.
start with a business problem first, and we generate hypotheses on how we can solve these business problems based on the gaps in existing literature and research. So it's actually very parallel to how scientists do their research. But I think often, especially these days in machine learning research, scientists are looking for a problem to solve with their techniques. We had a problem, and we were just exploring the different technologies and approaches and principles that could solve the business problem that was in front of us. And there was no goalposts, because it was the sponsor company for our PhDs in the first instance that decided whether we solved it or not us. We couldn't change any benchmarks to show how good the solution was in a certain environment. It was, does it work in real life or does it not work in real life?
It's interesting. So in the case for Jonas, that Intel was a sponsoring organization, and for you, another organization.
I was working with a startup called Bold Vision, and they had a lot of mining companies as clients. In fact, I've actually got them as a client in my new business, and I'm really happy to be working with them again. We picked up
That
content.
reflects well on you, that people want to work with you again. No, it's interesting just because I think a lot of scientists in like space tech, big energy tech, they're just now starting to partner with big companies that are, again, kind of filling this gray area between pure research and problem solving with research.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's especially if you notice in the past few years and the fast commercialization of, for example, you can take LLM technology as one of the key indicators is when it's just developed to be deployed in the real world,
Mhm.
the scientific approach to developing these technologies is ultimately aimed at accelerating real world adoption and real world use cases. So, and they have a constant feedback loop of whether people like it or not. So it's a very harsh world when you deploy your technology out. You can see especially with these kind of consumer centric use cases, it's easy to get the feedback. In space tech and others that you mentioned, it might be a bit more difficult.
Right.
This same kind of concept, right?
This is a little easier, but I still think you're in an interesting area because you all are using LLM like LLM like technologies, right, in the work that you're doing, or no?
So we actually say, I would like to say LLMs are almost being molded into the layer of the infrastructure layer of the value
Hmm.
chain at the
Hmm.
moment, and then there's an application layer underneath that uses LLMs to
Hmm.
build.
I would
Uh,
agree
di-
with that. And I think that's happening in corporate life, not just specific to Perceptura, but I see that across the board. It's almost like e-commerce. We don't say that anymore. AI is everywhere. And so the LLMs are really everywhere, taking over for IDEs in a lot of ways.
sure.
Um, so the reason I bring that up is just that there's similar to doing when you take your great idea to the company and you get harsh feedback in the
Yeah.
scientific world. I think more and more enterprise founders like yourself are getting that harsh feedback because so many decisions are kind of one-way decisions in the AI world. You have to make a lot of really good bets up front, whereas in the previous world before AI, you could, throw it out there, mess up, pull the whole thing back, redo it. And that's less true. Certainly, it was always less true in data, but it's also not true in the LLM world. You really have to make some pretty important technical and architectural bets early.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially depending industry specific as well, as I'm sure with your experience shows in regulated industries, you can't just deploy anything to fintech.
I think it's fundamentally different. I think we may have lost the skill a little bit in the
Yeah.
technical architectural world. And so we'll come back to that, but coming back to Perceptura. So many organizations for 20 years have talked about, well, we're going to give you a dashboard that shows you some root cause analysis. And then, people were like, well, tell me then, just give me some recommendations on what to do. And they'll say things like, oh, you should reduce costs and increase sales in this organization. It was, fundamentally people have wanted what you are delivering, but the products have been relatively undifferentiated and haven't really answered the mail, has been my experience. So what's different in your opinion, not just to give an ad, but like technically what's different in Perceptura that's really truly doing causal discovery?
So I'm going to start with the problem as it manifests itself today in the industry, and then I'll talk
Oh
about
yeah.
how our technology solves it differently. So analytics with current tools is still ultimately human led. So you need to know two specific things to solve a problem, and that's what question to ask and what data to look at. And you need to know these two things simultaneously before you get any insight from the data today. And then you use the tools to extract the answers to your questions quicker, or process the data that you want to look at quicker. So
Let me pause you for
ultimately,
a second. Yeah, let me
yeah,
just, because if people aren't familiar with this problem statement of what is the question to ask, and then let's get into the data, right? Access to the actual data. In the last 10 years, something weird has happened in most complex industries, which is that is not the same person often. Right? Just the getting that, let's say we were just going to do it with a human, Perceptor doesn't exist. It's
yeah,
actually so much more. I mean, I think if you're just a generic business person who didn't know this world, you say, oh, okay, great. We'll hire Jocelyn. She'll figure it out. But it actually is so much harder because of cloud data and because these roles have been bifurcated. Sometimes you actually can't get both of those items into this package. I know it sounds ridiculous, but the reality is access to the data and the right questions could be a months-long or weeks-long activity.
Yes, and ultimately that makes it even worse, right? Because let's say, the product person wants insights on how their part of the product is performing. They might know what aspect of the data to look at, or they might know what they want to look at. But then when they're asking the data engineer who's going to be pulling that data out of the warehouse
Mm-hmm.
for them, they need to provide full context and a full spec list, which makes the question, which makes the process so much
It makes it
and
slower. It
even
makes it monolithic, right? You're either
yeah.
getting an answer or you're not. And this is, if you haven't done this, like in a large company with like multiple lines of business, it is possible, and it's happened to me. You can get into a business that, say, I won't name names here, but like all they do all day is lend money, or like make loans, right?
Yeah.
And you could say, as a new employee, well, how many loans do we originate? The basic questions often can't be answered because the data is so strewn around. And I think anybody listening here, probably in their own domain, has come across like very fundamental questions that simply can't get answered because exactly what you're saying, the right questions and the right data just kind of are too siloed.
Yes, absolutely. And this process really should be owned by one single person or a system.
Mm-hmm.
So the and the thing that makes this problem so much worse now is just the sheer volume
Right.
and the multidimensionalness of data that we have these days. Your brain physically does not have the capacity to hold a multidimensional view of your entire operation anymore, just given how complicated it is.
So
If
when you
you're
say
thinking about,
multidimensional, what do you mean? Just curious, just to define the term.
oh, so for example, think about supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
Supply chain, if you're looking at the whole third-party logistics supply chain up to your area of the supply chain, and then
Ah,
you
yes.
using you physically just trying to internalize that whole
The
thing and
map, the
think
sort of
about
process map kind of falls apart, or
exactly.
is inaccurate. No, that's true. I thought you were actually going to say too, like the multimodal nature of data that we're actually putting into all of our models. And as part of like, you might want like a picture of everybody who came in and out of the store that day,
Yeah.
as much as you might want the store's like whatever register numbers.
I mean that is obviously that's a huge problem as well. But I think that the tools that exist today do sometimes lend a hand to solving these problems as well.
Hmm.
So um, there are tools that take in image data and text and can structure it for you and can and read it and summarize. But it's often when that text data relates to other text data or another table in another place, and it starts to get really complicated and messy, the relationships between everything. That's when, it's really difficult to internalize and have that map constantly in your head. And then when it's in your head, it's in no one in the organization's head because it really occupies a full-time job just to understand. And then I think that's where causal modeling really helps in the way
Hmm.
we've approached causal modeling, because we I like to think of us as a hypothesis generation machine. So we find the questions that we need to ask in order to get the answers that we need to improve a specific process. So we surface the root causes of what's going on without waiting for someone to ask the perfect query. And then you want to say, how can I improve this specific aspect, or what's causing this thing? And we can use the causal structure that we have of the data, or the cause and effect relationships behind every single individual data point that we're collecting in order to answer the question directly.
And how, I mean, obviously not sharing any trade secrets, but how are you doing that that's different from, say, just like a waterfall of machine learning observations or statistical analysis?
So it's a three-stage system that we put in place, and I think it's really the it's our learnings from enterprise work that we've done in the consulting world, and stuff we've done in our PhDs that's been applied, that's made it like this. So we the first layer is what we call the autonomous ontology. So that's when we build essentially a shared language of what relates to what, with reference to three anchors, and that's the entity, the time, and the place. What, when something is happening, where it's happening, and to what it's happening to. So when you build these three reference points into your ontology, it
Hmm.
means it covers every single uh, physical or spatial attribute that you can use to group together reference points of data. In a sense,
How,
there is no other axis in the real physical world that you can use.
So this is that autonomous data mapping or ontology.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Okay.
imagine, you've got finance logs, CRM events, supply chain feeds, support, Zendesk logs, all of that. You can unify that into one coherent model. And then you can start pulling things about, we want to know what happened to this customer in this time period. And then you
And
can build it around those reference points. That's the
that's
first
where
thing.
you're kind of reasoning. You're reasoning over this body of information. Is
Yeah.
that right? Okay.
Yeah. And it allows us to bring in all the information that relates to that entity or that time or that place, even if we don't 100% know at that point if it's related or not. So we bring all of it in for the initial analysis.
And that's really where the bulk of your, like the impact of your scientific research has come into play. Is that right?
Ultimately, yeah. And
Okay.
and it inspired the next layer, of course, which is the final layer, which is the modeling and the digital twin aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, as you can imagine, with machines, there's machines. The digital twin for machinery is quite prevalent. We've kind of just taken it into the business world, and there are companies like out there like Salonis that do process mapping, but
Mm-hmm.
like we've kind of automated it and grounded it in causality.
Why do I need a digital twin? If you
Why?
have all this, you've got all this context, you've got some, ideas about what's causing what. Why do I need a digital twin at that? Why do I need that third layer?
So I think that a digital twin, to give it a formal definition, it's a digital model of a system or a process.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you're representing a physical process in terms of it's digital data, and the reason why you need that is that it allows you to understand how your process works from a bird's eye view.
Mm-hmm.
Allows you to model things on that process
Okay.
to think, how can things happen if I do it in a different way?
I
So
got you.
it forces you to understand how your process works and the things that can be impacting it, whether you're measuring it or not. And then it helps you understand the dynamics of the process. If you change this thing to another thing, well, how does it change the whole process as a whole, and so on.
I got you. So the precision of precision causal discovery is really just identifying observations. It's like a library of observations, and then you're really modeling it and doing your what if analysis in the strategic digital twin layer.
Absolutely, yeah. So
Okay.
when we have our the second layer in the middle that's doing the cause and effect analysis on that big view of the data with reference to those anchor points that I mentioned, that then prunes away all of the things that are completely irrelevant, that don't impact, that have a causal impact at all on that
Mm-hmm.
entity, time, or place. And then we start to think, what are the real cause and effect relationships in with reference to this anchor? And then after that, we can start to look at it and say, what are things that we're not measuring explicitly that are having an external impact on our
Yeah.
process? And this right here is why causal has failed in the past.
Say more
Is that
about that. I don't understand why it's failed in the past, but it certainly has.
so? When you're training a machine learning model, you have a set of inputs and you have an expected output, and you're kind of minimizing the error between the input. And that's how you get an accurate machine learning model. And obviously there are problems around that with overfitting, so you can fit to data. But ultimately, what's happening inside the machine learning model is it's encoding in what we call its latent space, or its weights, the the relationship between the input variables and the complex interactions between them,
Mm-hmm.
and uses it to either classify or provide an output value, however, whatever you're using the model for, either regression or classification, uses it to provide an output value that, with respect to those input values, that maps as it's seen it in the training data. So implicitly, it's learning the relationship between the multi dimensions of the inputs and then the expected output. Now, when you try and do causal is an explainable version of this, but machine learning can then encode any external influences as almost as noise in the weights. And it doesn't need to explicitly recognize and identify and model it. With causal, because you're modeling on a node by node basis, a data point by data point, variable by variable basis, you need to have some mechanism of identifying that external influence on any causal relationships that you've got in your data. Because if not, then you've actually got a missing model. You've just got the things that you're looking at right now, how they impact each other, and you're completely ignoring the things that could be outside of your data that still have a direct influence on the process that you're looking at. And that will result in a really inaccurate model at the end.
Okay, so let's walk through an example of, say, like customer churn.
Yes, customer churn. For example, you can say, look at a specific customer base without reference to time, and you can say, well, this specific service customers are churning from, fiber optic service. So let's say we then bring the weather and the time, or the time in the mix, for example. Then we can say, well, actually, why are they all unsubscribing in November? And it turns out one of your competitors is putting out a really nice fiber optic subscription offer in November, where people are leaving your service to go to another service. Another example, just that might hold more weight, would be, let's say, marketing. So marketing's had a really good week, and their campaign's gone really well for website conversions. And this is what they're saying, at least, and the numbers are showing it if you're looking at the marketing numbers in isolation. But then if you start taking into account your in-person shop day revenue, and then you take into account the weather, you'll find that the marketing campaign coincidentally coincided with rain, a very rainy and thundery week. So your customers that would typically go in person and buy stuff from the shop, they stayed at home and they went to your website. So can you really make the conclusion that the marketing campaign went well, or is it circumstantial? And with a machine learning model, all of this thought process there is completely inside a black box, and you'll never be able to get it out. But with Causal would essentially give you the map and help you through that thought process of saying, well, actually, you need to consider whether if you control for the weather, because the weather clearly has an impact on how many people are flocking to your website in the first place. If you control for the weather, does your marketing campaign really have a good impact on them? So you need to do tests where in different weathers, in order to, in different weather and climate, in order to figure out whether that style of marketing campaign has a good impact on them.
And that's what Perceptura can do. It's like, that's different, is really give you this kind of pause to think about all of the elements that might be affecting a particular outcome. And I think it's really great. It's telling you, it's not just a committee of risk managers sitting around saying like, what's this? What about that? What about this? I mean, I've just been in the long time ago, even when you had like large scale Unix systems, it'd take a day to run a new question. It takes a lot of compute, a lot of refactoring. So I can definitely see why people would be interested in that. I have a couple of kind of deep cut questions, which may or may not be of interest to the audience, but real quick, in terms of the ontology that you're putting together, this autonomous ontology, it's a timestamp and two other things: what happened and where you sent it.
So location. So
location.
If there's a column that has the zip code or the city or the country, or latitude and longitude, like GeoJSON, all sorts of exotic formats that we find out there, that we take that as one of the anchor points, and we can link that to other things happening in the same location.
Okay.
You have another data set with that same column that we can say, actually, all these things are happening in the same location. So we can build a data set of things happening in one location and see if there's any relationships there.
So this is a physical location in the world, not a location like a path to a data sort. Data. Okay, got you. That's where I got hosed up. I got a little hosed up there because that sounds like change data capture, but what you're explaining is like a real place in the world.
Yeah. And then time is obviously just time. So things are seconds, minutes, days, months, weeks, years, and we can combine data with reference to things happening at the same time. And then we've got the thing that it's happening to. So the customer ID or the order ID or the whatever government ID, whatever reference or identifier something has, and then that group of things, what's happening to all of them, and what can we notice about the relationships between the things that are happening to that thing, whatever that thing is. Could be
You're
an
creating
object.
an entity. Is this the item that happened in time? This item at a
Yeah,
certain location at a certain moment in time. It's kind of like linear algebra. You have like a
exactly.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And then you're sort of fitting this over the entire data estate, which has a lot of different sources. I don't know if you've noticed this. Just
Yeah.
kidding.
So,
Um,
and that's obviously the magic of it, because it means at that point, once you've built that spider web of all of those three anchor points, you can start asking questions like, can I see any causal relationships in my sales data for these customers? And then
mhm.
it will pull that view of the data with reference to those customers, and then it will start looking for cause and effect relationships. And then you can
That-
say, well, actually, what about these customers in this location? And then it can then put another view and build a view of that customer in that location. And you can do it around, so you can combine different anchor points as well and reference points. You can say
that's, yeah.
quarterly sales, for example, and that's typically how we do it in the enterprise world anyway. So you would say quarterly sales for these customers, or quarterly sales for this business unit, or that kind of thing. And all we're doing is creating a shared language in terms of data that allows you to ask those specific kinds of questions.
Well, I know you're the biggest fan of the product, but I wouldn't say all you're doing, because this is like has been an unsolvable problem in corporate life, of different data sources and paths having, even though they're about the same thing, say like a customer, kind of not even speaking the same language, right? So many organizations also are trying to combine unstructured and structured data together, it's about a customer, but there's almost no real strong way to even do old-fashioned analysis on those types of combined data types and sources. So I do think it's a really interesting ancillary benefit of what you're talking about, right? Is the ability to treat all of your data as a single asset. And I assume this is all going into a graph.
Yes. So it's completely, it will be similar to, imagine using something like Neo4j as a
Hmm.
graph database, except you're anchoring it in terms of these three anchor points specifically, and any metrics that you want to calculate between these anchor points, and any
Gotcha.
just.
So I'm sliding into something that you brought up earlier, which is nothing is like cold splash of water in the face to your beautiful scientific baby hair than taking it into enterprise, right? Because I would imagine that collecting all this information into a graph and validating those nodes and edges, um, it's not a 10-minute process, right? Like, what have you learned? That's one thing that jumps to mind. But as you've kind of rolled this out into enterprise, what have you learned maybe that you expected to encounter, and what are some things you didn't expect?
So I think, well, there are a lot of interesting observations I have about enterprise deployments. First of all, technology wise, success metrics for a technology working successfully in enterprise is often very different from it scientifically working,
Mm.
because, well, the way with science, it's all about how you formulate your research question and how the methodology that you use to answer it. So
So it's like
that's
an idea of internal correctness. You start with one question, and the
yeah,
result connects to the
exactly.
original. Yeah.
Yeah, and then often, so just from the technical standpoint, not even deployment at this point, it's the other thing is the success of your technology often rests on it being able to handle messiness as well. So if you can
Mm.
handle messiness, you're already way ahead of any scientific research, which
That's
is, it's looking at fundamental concepts and not its application in a real environment, which is inherently messy.
I actually think scientific and other types of founders, but scientific founders struggle with this.
Yeah, it is really a point, a struggle, especially when you're just so used to having some clean data sets that you download off Kaggle, and then you're benchmarking and you're trying to work on different techniques to get to the to top of the leaderboard.
Hmm.
But the success metrics and the value metrics for customers is really different. It's they'll give you this spreadsheet that looks like it's Frankenstein, from a lot of different people, passed down from
Hmm.
24 years ago, and the way they've represented things have changed over time, and you need to recognize these things. It's in some cases it's near impossible to format it in a way, and you have to kind of tell them to go back and standardize. And what we try and get to is we find we're more successful. And the real reason why we built this ontology is so we can take in as messy a data as we can with zero context and get it in a format that our algorithms can accept. It's a bridge
What does that
between.
process look like? Is that like a setup process when you're operationalizing this? Is there a period of time when you're just kind of continuing to fine tune that and then you release this into the full enterprise environment?
This is where we use LLMs. We
Okay.
use LLMs to get semantic understanding of things like column names, category names, misspelling between categories, all these sorts of things. And this is, we can start enriching the data that we get, which has no context, with language models like read of what's going on. And then we start using statistics in combination with these things in order to understand what things are related and what things are not related.
And
And
that's
then we
to
can
make it repeatable.
exactly. And then we can start, let's say, aligning rare categories and saying, well, you've misspelt this specific word a couple of times, and it's in any other system, it would kind of resort to making that into a new category, but we can recognize that that can be merged into one of your existing categories because it's a misspelling. So we can start automating a lot of these minor cleaning techniques that we find that we can easily just automate that process.
And then that's validated by the customer somehow.
Yeah. So ultimately the things will happen in front of them, and they can see everything that's happened, and it's all explainable and it's all auditable. And if they don't like something, they can change it. What we found in our case is it's actually the opposite, that many a time they do not perform this cleaning. So they work with a lot of with data that's not fit for purpose a lot of the time, and they can get
That's right.
results and assumptions from that, of course. Ultimately, we found that customers don't change what we discover for them, and because I mean, one thing is
That's huge.
our system's scarily accurate, which is great for us, but it's like we are almost not forcing but instilling in them the main principles of how they should be approaching analytics and decision making data, because
Absolutely
many
cool.
don't have it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, not to put too fine. I mean, I'm in the finance world, maybe in medical and other places where it's higher stakes, right? A lot of times I do think you've got data analytics and root cause analysis that is just chasing what the boss already thinks.
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting that you are finding this aligns, or that customers aren't changing it. That's very interesting to me because I would have expected them to force fit it at some point. So you must be you must be convincing them. And I don't know, we're kind of coming to the end here. I want to ask you some spicy psychological questions about the interior life of scientists. However, before we get to that, how's Perceptura doing? I don't know if you can share any early wins or give us a sense of what's going on as a company, but it would be great to hear a little bit about how the company's doing.
Yeah, so I mean, the company is we're hitting our snowball phase. So we've recently onboarded some more engineering firepower to handle more deployments that we're doing. Initially, we were focused on regulated industries and with like finance, healthcare, pharma, even manufacturing, that kind of thing, even a bit. Yeah, and now what we found is we're going into other more exotic kinds of use cases, like scientific applications, hypothesis generation for science. And we're working with scientific labs across the world and universities in order to do this. So universities are now going to start using our research and our technology to generate hypotheses about what their observational data is telling them, and not just universities, but national laboratories. So found that to be really interesting, is that we're seen as almost like a hypothesis generation machine, as I mentioned that term earlier, for them.
Oh, now I understand it, actually. I didn't quite catch you before, but now that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's been quite surprising. And I think other than that, it was the really interesting thing about the start of this journey was educating myself on how to explain causal to someone, and then educating the economic buyers that we're talking to about why causal is just more suitable for what they're trying to do.
Tell
And
me a little bit about that, actually, because that is kind of getting into the seam of the types of the way you describe things and talk about things. I actually interviewed somebody recently, and they said something I often don't agree with, but I could be wrong. So you tell me. That, you know, people don't want to know how it works. They just want to know if it's solving their problem. I personally would have a very hard time. I would have a hard time buying that. So, like, what advice would you give me in terms of explaining complex concepts to these business buyers?
so, I mean, I wasn't great at this at the start as well. But what I learned is the right kind of analogies work. So that we've recently been working with Rod Boothby, who's actually who's one of the co-founders of NPM, and he's helping us out a lot, and he's
Wow.
actually giving us a lot of different ways to explain the technology in a really simple way to both clients and customers and investors. So that Moneyball analogy was actually his
I
brainchild.
wondered.
I mean, I'm British. I don't watch baseball, but I like the film nonetheless. So this kind of thing where you need to pick an analogy that's not going to constrain you and compare you to other technologies that you're completely unlike, but an analogy that they would understand, that's completely irrelevant to your technology, that can relate to your technology. So if I started talking about, so how some people say we are Uber for X or we are Stripe
Yes.
for X, that puts you in a box. But if you start giving them analogies that are outside the point of reference for any technology they know, and it's just about the outcome and the application, that's when you can start to give everyone the right impression of what you're doing, and even a bit of how as well. So the other
Mm-hmm.
thing I would say for explaining complex technology is examples, and I do agree with you that people do want to know how it works unless you've already got customers, and then they trust that other smarter people have figured out that this is how it works.
Yes, I would warn everybody against that. You never know. Have to ask all your
Yeah,
own questions.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. You
unless
should,
you're
of
buying Perceptura, don't ask any additional questions. However,
course, just trust that. Yeah,
as a buyer, yeah, that's very easy to fall into that.
yeah. So that's probably where the impression comes in from. When you have a case study or two with a big name, then they say, "Oh well, uh, you know, Pfizer are using this technology, so we don't need to ask
Hmm.
how it's working. If they're this big conglomerates using it, then surely it'll work for us." Or, we've got this other company like the Microsoft has started engaging with these folks. They're really smart over there. In this capacity, this is one way to enter the market of just publishing really big name case studies, and
Hmm.
just for this, none of these companies that I mentioned we are working with, so this nothing like
Oh,
that.
right. This has all been, yeah.
Yeah, just maybe putting examples out there. But other thing is explaining it in terms of case studies and use cases. So
Hmm.
an adjacent use case, and then it kind of makes sense to them conceptually because they've been in that problem. So you can
And
explain
people
the
think in
problem.
metaphors often, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that a lot. And it's also just, I think you need to give different people different entry points because they're busy and it's hard to
Absolutely.
follow the complexity sometimes. So it just gives them a leg up. It doesn't mean they're not going to ask more questions.
Yeah.
So I really like the and analogies are hard actually to really hit it on the nose and get it right. It's hard. If there's somebody out there right now who's spending a lot of time thinking about optimization algorithms and thinking, hey, maybe I want to become an entrepreneur, like what are like 2 or 3 pieces of advice you would give?
I would say ultimate resilience is
Mhm.
my probably 1, 2, and 3 before anything is that
Okay, tell me what you mean by ultimate resilience. I think I agree.
you will fail in your journey in so many different ways. Like you will
Mhm.
fail on sales calls. You will design technology that doesn't work. You'll think it works and then it'll flop on a demo. You'll think it's the best thing since sliced bread, and someone will turn around and say, "I don't care."
Yeah.
You'll describe it like it's magic, and someone will say, "But that doesn't work." They'll doubt you to your face, and you just need ultimate resilience to everything. Like just
That's so. I love the term resilience. I was saying perseverance because I've just spent a lot of time with founders in the last few years, and the ones who succeed multiple times, I am impressed with their ability to take a beating and forgive themselves and move on. Yeah,
Yeah.
they continue every day. I've seen some of the smartest people in this business just, crap the bed in a call, or somebody's mad at that. It just doesn't work, whatever the thing is. And they are just able to dust themselves off and do 5 more meetings after that. Whereas I would probably be, eating chocolate in my car.
I mean, of course, we all want to do that, and there's nothing wrong with doing that once in a while. But you need to keep yourself motivated at the end of the day, and that's why I say resilience and not perseverance, because you need your motivation needs to be resilient to these external factors, because ultimately you need to be working on something that you really want to do for at least 5 years, the next 5 years, if not 10 years. You need to be prepared to work on this idea for years and years and years. And that
You have to
means
like it enough too. Yeah, I think that's the other
exactly,
thing. You can't be a cold-hearted moneymaker in this business exactly for these big
exactly.
ideas. You will get bored.
And you mentioned obsessiveness. That's where that comes in. It's like someone working on the same exact thing, saying the same exact words for 10 years requires a certain degree of obsessiveness, especially if they're not driven from above by anything else. If you're a bootstrapped business, especially, you don't have investors that are imposing things on you. You're just it's you and your own motivation that imposes your discipline.
Hey, I like the terms of words motivation too. It's not just raw discipline. You have to be like internally motivated, otherwise you will feel sad.
Yeah.
All right, so a couple more quick, like fun questions, and then we'll wrap it up. But what's a piece of advice one like a mentor or leader has given you that you take to heart?
So I think I think I've had a lot. I've been around a lot of good salespeople and visionaries, and I think just the way I explain things to
Hmm.
suit the person that's in front of me it always eluded me until I kind of got and the body language as well. It eluded me until I got a lot of good advice from these folks on exactly just being able to adjust and use analogies to it. I don't want to say dumb down, but kind of frame it in a way that suits their worldview.
It's suiting their and also their moment, right? Because you can have a very smart person who's not thinking about you. They're
Yeah,
not. They're not. I always think it's such a great idea to think to yourself, like, okay, I'm coming to this. What is this person coming to the conversation? What do they know? What are they likely to even remember from our last conversation? Because people are busy and they're frazzled. Even if they're totally engaged with you.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. And do you have like a habit that you think has made you personally successful that you would share?
Not really. I have two
Mine
rules
would
in
be like
life.
reading. I feel like you got to read.
The thing is, I do read, but I don't read as I feel like I don't read as habit. It just comes up. Like I know that this is something I need to understand in order
Uh-huh.
to wield to
This is
arm
part of your
myself.
resilience strategy. You're just
Yeah.
like kind of keeping it loose and resilient. I like it. Yeah,
I think the two things that have helped me with success is waking up every day and the motivation aspect, of course, and also just integrity. Like the really surprising thing about integrity is when it's not just something you want to say you have, and when you actually start operating with integrity and honesty, and you build your business off of honesty and integrity and transparency, you find that people forgive you more.
mm,
The people around your business partners and external partners, life gets a lot easier, and people trust you more. When something doesn't work and you tell them, well, that doesn't work, and we can't do that, and don't sell snake oil kind of thing.
hmm
All sorts of things around trust and integrity, whether it's with your own team or with when you're selling or with partners, just being raw and honest. People look at people take that and it makes your life a lot easier in so many different ways. You
it,
don't need to prove that you're better than you are. It's people love that raw honesty. I think that's what the whole of social media is built on nowadays anyway. It's just people filming their lives with raw, so-called raw honesty.
mhm.
And people like seeing that raw, unfiltered content. And especially when you're selling, you almost think like you're selling yourself as a person who's going to supply that solution as well as the solution.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's you heard it here on the podcast. You can have integrity and be a successful tech entrepreneur. Um, so just wrapping it up. Is there anything I haven't asked about Perceptor, or anything you want to share, like conferences you may be at, or anything that we should be watching this space? Should we just make sure that we're signing up for your newsletter? What would you like to share with me or the audience, to, like, what's coming up soon?
So we are undergoing a rebrand. We will be talking more about that on social media. It will involve a name change. So
Okay.
all will be revealed in due time, and it will come with a lot more reveals about just how good our algorithms are.
Oh,
And
good.
we may have inadvertently invented the matrix kind of algorithmic powers. As we will release all in due course, but at the moment, right now, we're early stage and we're testing out with customers that believe in us.
Okay.
So
Yeah, you've got some great new, so I know you can't talk about everything that's going on, but it sounds like some really great, dominoes and initial interest is getting closed. I would say that folks should follow you on LinkedIn or Instagram, wherever or X, wherever you're posting. I know you're on LinkedIn. I don't know where else you are. So they can get updated on the rebranding. Have you ever done a rebranding? Side note?
I think just once on
Okay.
in the consultancy, we did rebrand from we had the company name we were called AI Edge Labs, or AI
Right.
Edge, something like that, and we rebranded to Numvia. It was
Mhm.
an interesting rebrand, and it was very early, but this one's a bit later in the middle of us talking to investors. It's a bit messy when you're at an early stage, and who do I tell about this rebrand? Who do I not tell, that kind of thing? So
It's crazily messy. I cannot believe how ramped up people get about this stuff.
yeah, I
I
think
know
we're
it's
early enough.
important. Don't let me say the wrong thing on air, but I maybe don't care enough. I'd like things to be beautiful. I get that. Names are important, but I'm always surprised how ramped up people get.
Brand I found is ridiculously important. The emotion it incites in your customers is really what gets you through the door, and then
It's
after that,
really real.
yeah, it really is. So it's what influences their impression from the first thing you say, and then after that, it's up to you. But the first thing they see about you is your brand.
Right. And when you're a young company, you got to take all the shots on goal that you can get. Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure to catch up with you. I can't wait to check in a few months and find out more. It seems like you're really garnering quite a bit of momentum, and I'm excited about your approach.
Thank you very much for having me on, Jocelyn. It was really, really nice. It was a good experience as well. And yeah, looking forward to catching up.
Great.